I was kidnapped and forced to be a maid for a wealthy man in Thailand. This is my story. I went solo traveling around Asia 7 years ago, and Bangkok was my second last destination. It was at a street market that I met an extremely attractive European man who asked to take me out to dinner, and he was so charming I said yes. That night, he swooned me. He said he too lived in the US, not too far from me, and was also just on vacation here. After dinner, he took me to the best club in the city, and at the end of the night, he called us a taxi. It was in the taxi that he offered me water, and upon drinking it, my world went black. I woke up the next morning in the middle of a windowless room that I assumed was a basement. No one was there when I woke up, and I felt scared. I began screaming, crying, and banging at the walls for help. Eventually, I saw someone come in, a man who was not the same man I went on a date with. He was very tall and slim. He brought me food and water to drink. I took it and asked where the man I went to dinner with was, but he did not reply and left the room. Silence filled the room again. I ate the rice and meat they gave me because I didn't know the next time I would eat again. After hours went by, the silence was broken by more men entering the room. Each of them started inspecting me from a distance and then inched closer to me. I couldn't fight back. I was too scared, so I stayed in place. They checked my teeth and shined a flashlight in my face. The most horrifying part, they began to search me. They did it thoroughly, leaving no part unexplored. No words were exchanged between us, but they would talk to each other in another language that I didn't understand. I assumed it was Thai. Then soon after they left. The day after those men inspected me was really tough. I sat on the cold floor and hugged my knees close. My mind was full of questions, but I had no answers. I cried a lot to myself, wondering if I was going to pass away here, and if I was, would at least let me say goodbye. Was I held hostage? I had no idea. No one came into the room all day, which was a relief, but also made me feel more alone. The silence was deafening. It was hard to breathe. As the day went on, I kept thinking about the day before, trying to remember any small detail that might help me understand why I was here. But everything was a blur, their faces and their voices. None of it stuck in my mind. Days went by and my sense of time was completely out of whack. I didn't know whether it was day or night. The only thing that I had to entertain myself was the food and water they'd bring every once in a while. The room was big and bare and had a singular light bulb on the ceiling that barely illuminated the room. I felt like I was losing my mind. Every time I'd turn around, I thought I saw people in the room with me. I started hallucinating. At what I assumed was nighttime, I would dream about being home with my family, and then I would wake up to this nightmare. I cried most of the time. I regretted meeting with the man. I felt stupid for meeting with a guy I didn't know. I blamed myself for everything. One day, the slim man walked in and didn't bring any food with him. He only brought a glass of water. I took it, and after a few hours, I started feeling woozy. I fell asleep. I didn't know how long I was out. I woke up in a new location, which was in a beautiful bed of silk. The room around me was spacious with a high ceiling, and the walls had classic pieces of art on them. There was a large fireplace to the far left side of the room, and a man sat in a chair looking back at me. I screamed and tried to escape. I jumped out the bed and ran towards the door, but it was locked. I looked around the room frantically, trying to find any other exit. The man sitting in the chair just watched me as I ran around the room screaming for help. I couldn't find a way out. I yelled at him and told him to let me free. I told him that people knew I was there and they would call the police. Just looked at me. My stomach felt uneasy. I felt like I was going to throw up. I began to cry as I realized that I was stuck there. He came over and tried to console me. I wiggled out of his grasp and moved away from him. He began to speak to me in really broken English. He told me that he purchased me and I was supposed to be a maid for him. He said that I was welcome to anything in the kitchen and could join the other girls later that day. I would have my own room, and my duties would be to cook and clean for him. He offered hundreds of thousands of dollars for this. He seemed to be a man of power here in Thailand because of how he was living and how much money he seemed to have. There were 5 other girls there who served him and had to have been brainwashed into loving him. I saw this as the days went by. Either they were the best actresses in the world or they genuinely loved him. Days, then weeks went by, and I started working with the 5 other maids. When we were alone in our rooms, I would try to talk to them and see if they would keep up the facade of being happy there. But each and every one of them told me they were content and grateful that this man took them in. I watched them as they served him, each with precision and grace. It felt mechanical. Their smiles seemed too practiced, and their eyes were empty. I chose to conform and obey the man too, because truly I was extremely scared of what was going to happen if I decided not to do so. After a while, the man began to call me more to his room. He would prefer me to wash his clothes and serve him dinner. I wasn't sure why, but more often than not, the man found reasons to be around me. I think he thought I was prettier than the other girls. One night, he invited me to his library in the mansion. He told me to dust the bookshelf, and I did. As I was cleaning, I felt him watching me. I looked over and saw him nod and smile. He came over and picked up a book off the shelf. He asked if I had read it. I shook my head and he handed it to me and told me I should. He never wanted the maids to read, watch TV, or even listen to music, so his telling me to read this book felt like a test. I did as I was told and took it from him. Soon I was given more important tasks. He let me take care of his private study, a special room no other maid could enter. This made me realize he trusted me a lot. After being this man's maid for a year, I was his favorite. He would call on me to do almost anything and let me have special privileges that the other maids could not have. This infuriated the other maids, and I could hear them talking about me behind my back. They just didn't know about the trick that I had up my sleeve. One night, after cleaning the man's private study, I noticed a cell phone sitting inside the drawers of his desk. I hesitated and looked over my shoulder. I needed to know if this was a test, so for the first night I left it there and made note of where I found it. The next few days, as I cleaned his private study, I checked again, and the phone would be there, 2 drawers down on the left side of the desk. On the 5th day, I decided to open it. it. Luckily enough, there wasn't a passcode on it. I tried to contact anyone in the US. I hoped that my message would reach them. There was only one bar of signal that flickered in and out, so I grabbed the phone and walked around the room to find a better signal. I couldn't find any, so I climbed on top of the desk. Adrenaline flowed through me at the thought of being caught. I scrolled through the phone's contacts. Finally, I found a spot where the signal stayed lit. I quickly dialed a number, but it was difficult as my hands were trembling. The phone rang. The ringing felt like an eternity, and I was sure no one would answer, until I heard a voice on the other side saying hello. I felt my muscles finally relax. I was so relieved they answered. I said hello and asked if they could hear me. They asked me who I was, and I told them. I told them everything from the guy who invited me out to dinner over a year ago by this point, to the weeks in a basement, to now being trapped in a mansion in Thailand. I begged them desperately to help me. They said they needed my exact location, and I couldn't tell them anything, but it was a large mansion with many rooms, and was owned by what I assumed was a government official in Thailand. I asked if they could track the phone call to see my location. I begged and pleaded that they find me. They said they'd do everything to help me. I thanked them over and over and told them not to call this phone again. Just then, I heard footsteps walking up to the door. I panicked. I hung up the phone, threw it back in the drawer that I found it in, and continued cleaning. My heart raced. The door creaked open, and the man entered. He looked at me and smiled. I forced a calm smile, hoping he hadn't noticed anything unusual. The morning after I made the secret phone call was really strange. The mansion was super quiet. It felt like I could barely breathe. I barely slept that night. Every little noise made me jump. But the next morning, I saw the sunrise and knew it was time for me to start my day. All day as I cleaned and moved around the house, I felt like the man was watching me. He had smiled at me the day before, right after I hid the phone back in the drawer. Did he know something? I tried to act normal, but my heart was racing. As I finished my work for the day, I was super tired, but I couldn't relax. I didn't know if the police would come to rescue me, or if the man would find out I called for help. Days turned into weeks as I waited for the police to come. Each hour felt more agonizing than the last. During this time, I kept doing my job as usual, cleaning and helping around the big mansion, making sure everything looked perfect. I was really careful so that the man who owned the house and the other maids wouldn't notice anything different about me. They all went about their day like robots, doing their tasks perfectly and not talking much. Every chance I got, I would secretly check the cell phone I had found. The signal was still weak, just a tiny bar that barely let me send out any messages. I would quickly text to let someone know I was still okay and where I was in the house, then hide the phone again. I had to act normal, like nothing was wrong, even though I was really scared inside. When the man looked at me, or when I had to talk to the other maids, I made sure my face didn't show how nervous I was. I just focused on my work, setting the table or cleaning, trying not to let them see any fear. The man sometimes watched me a little too closely, making me worry he might be getting suspicious. I had to be really careful not to mess up. I would line up the forks and knives just right and keep my head down, hoping he wouldn't notice anything unusual. Finally, the day I had been waiting for arrived. I heard many sirens outside and saw many flashing lights at the front gate of the mansion. From a window, I watched as agents, people in uniforms who seemed to be more powerful than regular police, representatives of the US Embassy, walked in to talk to the man who had kept us there. He was really upset, waving his arms around as he spoke with the officers. He seemed to think it was okay to have us work for him because he was paying us like we were just regular employees. One of the officers came over to me quietly while this was all happening. He signaled that it was time to leave. My heart was pounding as they took me away from there. We walked past the man and the agent arguing, and they got me in the car safely. The look of betrayal on the man's face as I was escorted by authorities was burned into my memory. We went straight to the airport, and I got on a plane going back to the US. Sitting in my seat, I kept thinking about the man arguing with the agents, still trying to claim he had done nothing wrong. When the plane landed back home, I felt so relieved. More agents met me and told me I'd be taken to a safe place where I could rest and talk about everything when I was ready. Walking through the airport, I felt safe but also worried about the other maids I had left behind. I was back in the US now, and I knew I had a lot to figure out about how to get back to normal. Life from that point was hard. I tried very hard to keep my story away from news articles and managed to do so successfully. Reuniting with my family was surreal, and every day now feels like a gift.